Now I'm going to go ahead and clear my map here. I'm just going to create a new one for simplicity's sake. And we're going to talk about brushes. Brushes are the basic building blocks for a Doom 3 map. To create a brush, you can left-click with nothing selected. You left-click and drag. And let me back out the camera a little bit here. Alright. And that should do it. And yeah, so that's how you create a four-sided brush. If you want to resize the brush, adjust its dimensions, you can left-click outside the brush itself, and you left-click and drag, and you can see that both the 3D view and the orthogonal view update in real time. And you can do that for any side. You can also do it for the height. And you can also adjust the size of a brush in any view. So, for example, I can change the height here in the 3D view. Change the width. So, another way to resize a brush, you can resize two sides at once if you left-click at a corner and drag. And you can see I'm altering both dimensions here. Okay, now I'm going to cover basic object selection and deselection. To deselect an object, you can press Escape, and as you can see, the object is now no longer has the red selection indicator, and also here in the orthogonal view, your outline has gone from a red to a thickened black outline. So let me create another brush, actually maybe another two brushes. And we'll go ahead and cover selecting multiple objects. To select an object, you press Shift and left-click on the object. I'm going to press Escape to deselect. You can also select objects in any view. So Shift and left-click in the orthogonal view will select the object that's underneath the mouse pointer. To select multiple objects, you hold down Shift and left-click, and then Shift and left-click. And as you can see, you can select multiple objects that way. Now, when you press Escape to deselect, it will deselect everything. If you want to toggle a selection, like let's say we have these three objects selected, but we only want two of them selected, you can hold Shift and left-click, and that will toggle the selection that you on whatever object is underneath the mouse pointer. I've created this very odd collection of brushes in order to demonstrate a way to select brushes that are stacked directly on top of each other, especially in your orthogonal view. Let's say, for example, that I wanted to select this brush here. Well, you'll notice that in the orthogonal view it has the same exact size, and it's directly beneath this brush here. So if I tried to select the lower one in the orthogonal view by pressing Shift and left-click, you'll notice that the selection is only toggling the one on top. To get around that, you can hold down the Alt key and Shift, and then click. And you'll notice that the engine will cycle through every object that is directly underneath the mouse pointer. So, for example, if I move the mouse here, I will now have three objects beneath the mouse pointer, and it will cycle through all three. And I'm still holding Alt and Shift while I'm clicking. And again, another example would be over here. And then over here. Here it's cycling through all four of these. So that's just a way to quickly navigate through selections whenever you have objects that are stacked on top of each other. You can also move a brush by left-clicking within the brush itself and dragging. And as you can see, I'm not altering the dimensions of the brush, I'm just changing its position in the world. Now, if you're going to be moving objects and you know that you don't want to alter their dimensions in any way, you can click this button here that says Move Selection Only, No Size. And when that's enabled, if you click outside the brush and you drag, what normally would be resizing the brush will only move it. Now, in addition to being able to resize an object and move it around, you can also rotate an object. And you can do that using the free rotation. button up here, and you'll see that when you click on it, the outline becomes purple, and then it has a dot in the middle to represent the axis. And you can left click and drag, and you'll see that the object will rotate. In addition to doing a free rotation, you can also do 90-degree rotates, and you can also do axis flips very quickly using the buttons up here on the toolbar. So for example, if I select this brush and I choose Z-axis rotate, you'll see that the object has turned 90 degrees. And these buttons always work in a, they always turn in a clockwise fashion. So for example, if I wanted to flip this in the Y direction, I could click on that, and you'll see that it turned 90 degrees with each click. Same thing with X. I won't demonstrate that, but it's pretty straightforward. You can also flip along a particular axis, and you do that with the same set of buttons. So a Z-axis flip, and you can see that the entire object flipped, and it's kind of hard to see, but I've applied a texture so that hopefully you can sort of see that, like here, this particular circle in the texture is right along this edge. If I do a Z-axis flip, that circle is now here. So it does sort of demonstrate that it is flipping the object. And if you had something that was a bit more complex, it would be really evident as to what it's doing. But I wanted to quickly show you those flipping and rotation tools. And I guess one last thing that's really useful to show you about rotating brushes is that you can rotate multiple brushes at once. Basically, whatever is selected will be rotated. So if I do a Z-axis rotate, you'll see that all three brushes have now reoriented and done a 90-degree rotation. Again, that also works with the axis flipping. If I flip that, you can see that these objects are indeed flipping along the Y-axis. Another useful way to manipulate your object is through scaling. If you look up in the toolbar, you have the option Scale X, Scale Y, and Scale Z. Now, by default, when all the buttons are up, you are allowed to manipulate your object in any direction. So you can alter its width, its height, and its depth. However, if, say, I toggle Scale X and Scale Y, I'm now unable to make any changes in my XY top view because the X and Y dimensions have been locked. However, I can still change the height, as you can see in the 3D preview. I can change the height of the object because Z scaling is still enabled. However, what I've been doing here, resizing the object, really isn't what most people think of as scaling. To actually scale the object where both edges of an object expand proportionally, you can click this button here, and you'll see that the object turns green in the orthogonal view. Now, if I try to make changes, I still am unable to make any changes in the XY view, but when I make a change in the Z, you'll notice that in the 3D preview, both edges are expanding proportionally with my mouse movement. Now, if you want to scale an object in two directions at once, you need to make sure that the two directions that you want to scale in are toggled so that their buttons are up. And let me switch views here. And then I can left click and drag, and it will scale in both directions. Now, note that in order to increase the scale in both directions, you need to move the mouse in the positive direction for both axes. So that would be up and to the right. To scale down, you want to move your mouse down and to the left. You can also change the number of sides a brush has. By default, brushes are created with 4 sides, and you can increase or decrease the number of sides after you draw out the basic dimensions. Using a 4-sided brush, you can increase or decrease the number of sides it has by using the brush menu or the keyboard shortcuts Control 3, 4, 5, etc. on through 9. Or if you want to, you can even use you can create an arbitrary sided brush. So say if you wanted to create a 16-sided brush. So if I wanted to change this into, say, a 5-sided brush, I could either press Control 5 or click here in the brush menu, and I now have a 5-sided brush. If I want to change that back to 4, I press Control 4, and now I'm back to a 4-sided brush. Now, as you can see, in doing that, I'm no longer resting on the grid, so I'm going to press Control G, and now my object has resnapped to the grid. Now you can undo any operation in DoMedit by pressing Control Z, and you'll see that my object is now back to the 5-sided figure. And if I want to redo any operation, I can press Control Y. So Control Z to undo, and Control Y to redo.